Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 4-game slate for the NBA on DraftKings and FanDuel. I don't hate this slate too much because there's some decent value-ish plays, and there's not a ton of injuries, surprisingly. I mean, there's a few, but it's actually not a terrible slate, except for the fact that games are kind of not that ideal. So we have Boston over Golden State, Toronto over Minnesota, Brooklyn over Phoenix, Philadelphia over Portland. I mean, we got two games. They're going to be kind of more defensive battles, and then two games with several injury situations, and you know maybe one game that's a higher scoring potential game. I'm not sure. Not really the type of slate that I love. Obviously, it's also small, so you're gonna have to take some chances on some guys. Let's go ahead and get into the injury report here. We have the Warriors with Kuminga, Jam Green, and Wiseman out. They're really hurting at the center position there. For the Celtics, Brown is questionable, and if he doesn't play, that would definitely open up some Marcus Smart and stuff like that. For the Timberwolves, Gobert is doubtful, Towns is out, and Rivers is questionable. That will really open up Naz Reid if Gobert is in fact out. For the Nets, Kyrie is probable and Durant is out. For the Suns, Chris Paul is questionable. Booker, Cam Payne, and Shamet are all out. Now, I do want to mention for the Suns that there is some risk involved here because Cam Johnson should be back, and so that really takes away from Mikal Bridges and maybe even Dwayne Washington Jr. if Chris Paul doesn't play. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on that to see how that goes. So, just to note that he is back, so Bridges is definitely not going to be on the table today. And for the Trailblazers, Winslow is out and Nurkic is probable. So overall, it's not really a big injury slate day, and there's not a ton of value plays to come across from that. But I do have three plays I really like today, being Naz Reid being the top guy here. He has just absolutely been good with Gobert out, and he should be able to continue that today. His price has come up some, so do keep that in mind. And his ceiling is not as high as we'd actually like it to be. He hasn't been getting max minutes or anything like that. He's getting in the mid-20s, so he is capped a little bit, but he's got some upside at this price, and I think he's viable on the slate regardless, especially on a small slate like this. Josh Hart also pretty interesting today. Now he's been up and down lately. He's had kind of a slump for a few games, which is dropped his price significantly, and that's made him viable on the slate and a core play, I think. And then Anthony Edwards, with all the injuries there, he's getting a lot more offensive opportunity. Now, he's had some off games, but he's also had some really good games. I think this is a big-time game against Toronto, so I expect him to have a 50 fantasy point game here, and I expect him to be a good option on the slate. Then we're going to look at a couple other guys. Joel Embiid, he's one of the top options on the slate. He's been really good lately. Even when he doesn't play a full complement of minutes, he's still getting over 45 fantasy points. And in the last two games, he's been over 59, which is definitely good at the price point that he's at. He's actually slightly underpriced for his potential in this game, if you can believe it. And it's not a terrible matchup for him either. So I expect him to have a 30-plus minute game here and get in the high 50s or even low 60s, and even potentially a big, massive blow-up game. Then we're going to look at James Harden. For Philly, now he's not as ideal as Embiid because he's had some bad games lately, but he's also had games that are huge upside, and he's under $10,000, which is relatively rare for him. I typically like it when he's under that price point to load him up here. He shoots a lot of threes and stuff. The last game though, he just played absolutely terrible, but he has a bounce back opportunity here. The last time he played really terrible was against Detroit and Toronto. And it was kind of two back-to-back games, so hopefully he doesn't have a game like that again. But he does have a couple other games where he had big games after, like a lower-scoring game. As long as there's no injury issue there, he should be good to go. Gary Trent Jr. also very interesting today. He has some nice upside. He's been playing pretty well. A little bit inconsistent in the minutes perspective, but overall, everybody's playing for Toronto, and he's been playing, in the top rung of that. His price has come up though some, so do keep that in mind, but he is viable on the slate regardless. I would also say OG Anunoby is also viable here because of his price point pretty decent. He's had a couple off games lately though, but he's in the price range where he's reasonably consistent, and so I do think he's got a nice plus matchup as well. Minnesota is not a good defensive team, and Toronto should be able to take advantage of that. Then we're going to go look over here on FanDuel, and there's really not much difference in pricing between the two sites, surprisingly. a little bit different, but mostly pretty decent. Nas Reed, obviously a good option here with Gobert likely out. Obviously, want to make sure that Gobert is out, but Nas Reed should be a pretty good play today. He's a little bit cheaper over here, actually, or a little bit better when it comes to his price because he gets more, some blocks and stuff. Then we'll look at Pascal Siakam. I really like him here on FanDuel. He's played pretty solid, yet inconsistent lately, but his price is pretty reasonable here. And he has some upside in this plus matchup. Then we'll look at Anthony Edwards, who I really like today in general, just because he's got upside due to the injury situation, and he's kind of due for a big 50 fantasy point game, which I expect him to do today. He definitely has the potential, and he's going to have plenty of opportunity in this one. Then we'll look at Joel Embiid here as well at 11,500. Not quite as ideal as FanDuel or DraftKings rather, but he has upside here. The slate, you're gonna have to find the upside where you can. There's not a lot available, and that's why I think he's viable on the slate. Probably the best big option on FanDuel. And then Josh Hart, another guy that I think is kind of viable today. Not as ideal here on FanDuel as he is on DraftKings. He's almost $1,000 less on DraftKings, but he does have some upside. He has potential here, and he's been playing pretty well, and I expect him to have a pretty decent game here. I do like him better on DraftKings, though. With that said, guys, like I told you, this slate's not real great. Again, there's not a ton of injuries, but it's still an annoying slate being 4 games and not a ton of good plays. So that's what I have for you. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, and have a nice day, guys.